Why we create religion. Buddhism's path beyond beliefs. Religion. One word. Millions of reactions. Some people feel peace. Others feel fear. Some find answers. Others find only questions. Why does this single idea have such power over human hearts? Here's what's fascinating. Every culture on Earth has created some form of religion. From ancient caves to modern cities, humans keep searching for something beyond what they can see and touch. But why? What drives this universal need? And here's an even deeper question. What if the Buddha discovered something that goes beyond religion entirely? What if he found a path that doesn't ask you to believe anything, but simply to see clearly? Today, we're not here to convert or convince. We're here to explore the most human question of all. Why do we create religion? And how does Buddhism offer something surprisingly different? Not another belief system, but a way to understand your own mind. Chapter 1. The religion idea and our brains need to believe. What exactly is religion? Try to define it, and it slips away like water through your fingers. Is it about gods, rules, sacred books? The truth is, religion isn't one thing, it's a process. A deeply human response to being alive and aware that we will die. Religion does something specific for us. It gives meaning when life feels meaningless. It offers comfort when we're afraid. It helps us face the terrifying reality of death and the mystery of suffering. Religion becomes our answer to the biggest questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? How should we live? William James understood this when he said, "Religion, whatever it is a man's total reaction upon life. It's how we respond to the overwhelming experience of being human. When this response is driven by fear and craving, it creates more suffering. But when guided by wisdom, it leads to genuine peace." Here's something remarkable that science has discovered. Our brains are literally built to believe. Evolution gave us minds that constantly search for patterns, even when none exist. We see faces in clouds, hear voices in the wind, feel someone watching when no one's there. This helped our ancestors survive. Better to mistake a shadow for a tiger than ignore a real threat. But this same brain pattern makes us naturally prone to creating beliefs, especially ones that comfort us or make us feel safe. We don't just want answers, we need them. The uncertainty of existence can feel unbearable. So we construct stories that explain everything. Gods who control the world, souls that never die, cosmic purposes that give our lives meaning. One of our deepest fears is death, the thought that we might simply vanish. So we create elaborate stories of heavens, hells, and eternal souls. Buddhism does teach about rebirth, but with a crucial difference. It's not about reward or punishment from some divine judge. It's simply about continuation based on our actions and the momentum of our choices. Yet the ultimate goal isn't to keep going forever. It's to become free from the entire cycle. That's nirvana. Not a place you go to, but the end of clinging itself. Our brains naturally gravitate toward belief, yet the Buddha spoke of something entirely different. Direct seeing. Not believing in truth, but recognizing it. This reveals something profound about the Buddhist path. It doesn't reject belief, but holds it lightly. When we stop clinging to our mental constructions as absolute reality, space opens up for genuine wisdom to emerge. The question becomes not, what should I believe, but what can I see clearly right now? Chapter 2. Faith, Community, and the Edge of Blind Trust. Faith often feels deeply personal, a quiet knowing you can't quite explain but feel in your bones. Yet humans are not just individual believers. We're creatures who believe together, and this changes everything. Most of what we believe doesn't come from our direct experience. It comes from those around us, family traditions, cultural stories, teachers we trust, communities we belong to. In religion, this shared believing becomes sacred. The Christian Church, the Buddhist Sangha, the Islamic Ummah. These communities offer something powerful. The feeling that you're not alone in the universe, that others share your deepest values and fears. But here's where it gets complicated. Community can become conformity. The same need that draws us together can also pressure us to fit in, to suppress doubts, to stop asking difficult questions. Psychologists have shown that humans will go to extraordinary lengths to belong to their group, even abandoning their own perceptions and intuitions. We'll agree with obvious lies if everyone else seems to agree. We'll follow leaders into harmful actions if the pressure to conform is strong enough. Religion, as a collective force, can amplify this tendency dramatically. In its best form, religious community becomes a container for shared growth, mutual support, and collective wisdom. In its worst form, it becomes pressure to agree, to obey without question, to stop thinking critically. When faith transforms from open inquiry into rigid certainty, it can justify terrible things: persecution of outsiders, suppression of questions, even violence against those who believe differently. The Buddha saw this danger clearly. In the famous Kalama Sutta, he offered something radical for any religious teacher. Do not go by reports, by legends, by traditions, by scripture, by logical conjecture, by inference, by analogies, by agreement through pondering, by probability, or by the thought, "This contemplative is our teacher." But when you know for yourselves that these things are wholesome and blameless, that they lead to welfare and happiness, then accept them and live by them. This principle is called ehipassiko, come and see for yourself. It's an invitation to test teachings through your own experience, not just accept them because they sound good, because everyone else believes them, or because some authority figure says they're true. This is revolutionary. A spiritual teacher telling his followers not to believe him blindly, but to verify everything through their own practice and observation. The comfort of community can be seductive. It's much easier to feel safe in a group that claims to have all the answers than to sit with uncertainty and keep investigating. This is precisely where healthy faith can tip into dangerous fanaticism, when beliefs are held not as open inquiries or working hypotheses, but as unshakable truths that divide the world into us versus them. Yet the Buddha didn't reject faith entirely. In Buddhism, Sada, often translated as faith, is actually confidence born of understanding. It's the trust that arises when your own experience begins to confirm what you've heard or read. Not believe first and then you'll see, but rather practice the path, observe the results, and let understanding grow naturally. True spiritual community requires a delicate balance, offering support without suffocation, guidance without dogma, belonging without conformity. The strongest communities are those that encourage their members to think, question, and grow, creating not a congregation of believers, but a fellowship of sincere seekers, each walking their own path while supporting others on theirs. Chapter 3. Buddhism, a path beyond typical religion. There's something quietly radical about Buddhism that becomes clear when you look closely. It doesn't arrive with grand declarations, promises of divine salvation, or threats of eternal punishment. Instead, it presents itself almost like a scientist's laboratory notes, careful observations about how the mind works and what leads to suffering versus peace. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago, he wasn't trying to start a religion. He was simply investigating a fundamental question: why do we suffer? And more importantly, is there a way to live without being constantly caught in cycles of dissatisfaction, anxiety, and pain? What he discovered wasn't based on divine revelation, ancient tradition, or philosophical speculation. It came from direct, sustained observation of his own mind and the patterns of human experience. He was, in essence, conducting experiments in consciousness, and his discoveries can be replicated by anyone willing to do the same careful investigation. Consider how different this is from most religions. While others center on a creator God and an immortal soul, the Buddha taught something remarkably different. There's no supreme deity to worship, appease, or fear. And one of his core insights is anatta, no self. The recognition that what we call our fixed identity or eternal soul is actually an illusion. This doesn't mean you don't exist. It means that what you call I is not a single, solid, unchanging thing. It's more like a river, a flowing collection of changing thoughts, emotions, sensations, memories, and perceptions. When we cling to this flow and treat it like a permanent, separate self, we create suffering. When we observe this mind-body process with clear awareness, without clinging or rejecting, something remarkable opens up. We begin to taste genuine freedom. The Buddha's approach was profoundly practical and experimental. He didn't ask people to have faith in his enlightenment. He showed them a systematic method to investigate their own minds and discover their own liberation. The Noble Eightfold Path isn't a list of beliefs to accept. It's a set of practices to engage. These aren't moral commandments handed down from above. They're more like a doctor's prescription based on careful diagnosis. If you're suffering from the disease of mental confusion and emotional reactivity, here's the treatment plan. Try it yourself and see if it works. As Joseph Campbell observed, the Buddha is not a savior. He's a teacher. He shows you the path. No promises of magical rescue, no requirements to worship or surrender your intelligence. Just a clear methodology. Pay attention to how your mind works, understand the causes of suffering, and learn to live with wisdom and compassion. What makes this fundamentally different from typical religion is its emphasis on direct experience over doctrine, investigation over acceptance, and personal verification over institutional authority. In many traditions, you're asked to believe first. In the Buddha's approach, you're invited to practice first, to meditate, to observe your thoughts and reactions, to cultivate kindness, and let understanding arise naturally from your own experience. The Buddha's Dharma presents itself not as another belief system demanding allegiance, but as a practical methodology for inner transformation. Like a skilled scientist of consciousness, the Buddha documented his discoveries about the nature of suffering and freedom, then invited others to replicate his experiments in the laboratory of their own lives. Chapter 4. The Real Goal: Transformation, not just belief. Many people think religion is primarily about belief, accepting certain ideas, following prescribed rituals, and hoping for rewards in an afterlife. But if we look deeper, especially through the lens of the Buddha's teachings, we discover that the real purpose is not just believing something, but becoming something fundamentally different. Not better in a worldly sense of success or status, but genuinely free from the inner patterns that create suffering. The ultimate purpose isn't what you believe, but who you become and how you live. It's an inner revolution, a fundamental shift from being unconsciously driven by reactive patterns to embodying wisdom, compassion, and genuine peace. This transformation is both the path and the destination. This change begins with honest recognition of what Buddhism calls the three poisons: lobha, greed; dosa, hatred; and moha, delusion. These aren't moral failings to feel guilty about, but natural patterns that arise in untrained minds. Greed isn't just wanting money. It's the endless craving for experiences, recognition, security, or anything we think will complete us. Hatred isn't just anger. It's any form of pushing away what we don't want, including subtle irritation or judgment. Delusion isn't just being wrong about facts. It's the fundamental misunderstanding of how life actually works, believing that happiness comes from getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want. But transformation goes far beyond just recognizing these patterns. It involves actively cultivating their opposites: generosity instead of grasping, loving kindness instead of hostility, and wisdom instead of confusion. This isn't about suppressing natural human reactions, but about understanding them so clearly that you're no longer unconsciously controlled by them. This inner change follows a clear progression that the Buddha mapped out carefully. First comes ethical action, sila. Not following rules out of fear, but living in ways that don't harm yourself or others. This creates the stable foundation needed for deeper work. Next comes mental cultivation, samadhi, training the mind to be steady, concentrated, and clear through meditation and mindfulness practices. Finally comes wisdom, panya, direct insight into how things actually work, beyond concepts and beliefs. When someone genuinely begins to transform from the inside, you can feel it in their presence. They become naturally more patient, spontaneously kinder, less reactive to stress and conflict. They speak with care and listen with real presence. Their peace isn't dependent on external circumstances going their way. This is the fruit of authentic transformation, not magical powers or supernatural experiences, but a mind that knows its own inherent peace. Here's something beautiful and unique about the Buddha's approach. Even his own teachings are not meant to be clung to forever. He famously compared the Dharma to a raft, essential for crossing the river of suffering to the shore of liberation, but to be let go of once you've reached the other side. My teaching is like a raft, he said, for crossing over, not for holding on to. This is profoundly different from systems that ask you to believe their doctrines forever. The Buddha's teachings are medicine for the disease of suffering. Once you're healthy, once you've developed genuine wisdom and compassion, you don't need to keep taking the medicine. You simply live from that health naturally and spontaneously. spiritual transformation reveals itself as perhaps the most practical endeavor imaginable. It's not about becoming someone else entirely, but about removing the layers of conditioning, fear, and confusion that obscure who you truly are underneath all the mental noise. The goal isn't perfection in some idealized sense, but authenticity, the courage and clarity to live from your deepest wisdom, rather than your surface fears and reactive patterns. Chapter 5. Living the Path, Spirituality in Daily Life. When people hear the word enlightenment, they often imagine something far away, something only for monks or saints after years of deep meditation. But the Buddha's teaching isn't about escaping from the world. It's about how we live right here, in this messy, ordinary, beautiful life. You don't need a temple, a robe, or a quiet forest to walk the path. You just need to pay attention to how you speak, how you think, how you respond. This is where real practice begins. In the middle of traffic, during a hard conversation, while washing dishes, or waiting in line. Living the Dharma means bringing awareness and care into each moment. It's about being present when you make your morning coffee, feeling the warmth of the cup, noticing your breath before answering someone in anger, returning to stillness even when life feels chaotic. We often think spirituality is something extra, something we need to add to our already busy lives. But the Buddha didn't give us more things to do. He offered a way to be, a way to meet life with clarity, kindness, and courage. You don't need perfect conditions. The path isn't found somewhere else. It's right under your feet. When you pause instead of react. When you listen instead of interrupt. When you choose compassion over judgment, even for yourself, that's the path in action. Nirvana isn't a future reward. It's a different way of seeing, of being. A mind that's not always grasping or resisting, but open, steady, and free. Even for a moment, touching that space changes everything. This path doesn't require you to be perfect. It only asks you to return again and again to what's real. One breath, one step, one small act of patience. That's all it takes to begin. As the Dhammapada says, mind is the forerunner of all things. If you speak or act with a pure mind, happiness follows you like a shadow that never leaves. The quality of your mind shapes the quality of your life. Let your life itself become your temple. Let each ordinary moment become a chance to wake up. You don't need more time or more knowledge, just a little more presence, a little more love, and the courage to start with what's right here. The path is not far. It's in your next breath.